أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وأصحابه وبارك وسلم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Can everybody hear me? Can just respond in the chat, inshallah. Great. So on behalf of At-Tanzil and Nurul Mubin Publications, I'd like to welcome everybody to this course. I hope that you will find it beneficial and you'll learn something from it, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Allah grant us sincerity and may He accept our efforts. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. So the introduction to the course we had last week already. Why? Because there's quite a lot that we need to do in every session. In order to cover the entire book within the 12 weeks, we have to do 2 lessons per session. So every lesson will be broken up into 2 halves. We will look at the first half and then the second half, inshallah. And that's why I decided to have the introduction to the course the week before, so that we can actually jump straight into it. So those of you that were joined the meeting a bit early, you'd have heard I was playing a recitation in the background. And I mentioned in the introduction that there's a lot of ignorance with regard to qira'at. Hopefully all of you that are here are at least aware that there are the existence of other qira'at besides the riwayah of Hafs and Asim, even if you cannot perhaps distinguish between them. And the object of the course is clearly stated here in the title of the book. It is hopefully to guide you to be able to discern between the 10 recitations, so that when you hear something like that in future, you hear an audio, a recitation, somebody reading in a particular riwayah other than Hafs, that you're not just aware that, okay, this is now a reading other than Hafs, but actually know which particular riwayah and reading it is. So we're going to begin by looking at the 10 Quran, the 10 qira'at, inshallah. Again, can somebody just indicate, can you see the screen? It should be a presentation on the screen right now. I'm just going to maybe make this quickly. So the Quran was revealed by Allah Azza wa Jal. It was revealed by Allah Azza wa Jal by the angel Jibreel alayhi salam to the heart of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, wa innahu latanzilu rabbil alamin, nazzala bihi ar-ruhul amin, ala qalbika litakuna minal munzirin. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam then in turn taught it to the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, who in turn taught it to the Tabi'un rahimahullah, who passed it on to the next generation. So the people that follow, they are known as Qurra, and the various qira'at that we have, they are named after them. Each Qari had 2 students known as Rawis, who passed on the recitation. And the different riwayat we have are named after them. So the first one looking at is Asim al-Kufi, and his student is Hafs. Why are we mentioning this particular riwayah first? Is because this is the way that the majority of the world recites. Some of us might not be aware of it, but hopefully we are. That when we're reading the Quran, we are most likely reading according to the riwayah of Hafs and Asim. The other student of Imam Asim is Shu'bah. So you have Asim, the Qari on top, and his 2 students, Hafs and Shu'bah. However, Shu'bah actually comes first and then Hafs. When you do the qira'at, it's a particular sequence that we follow. And so even though Hafs is the most well-known, it's not the first in the sequence. The first in the sequence is Imam Nafiya, who is from Medina. You can see the title there below, Al-Madani is from Medina, and his 2 students are Qalun and Warsh. Then you have Ibn Kathir al-Makki, and his 2 Rawis, his 2 narrators are Bazzi and Qumbul. The next one is Abu Amr al-Basri, he was from Basra. His 2 Rawis are Duri and Susi. We have Ibn Amir from Ashami, and his two rawis are Hisham and Ibn Dhakwan. And then we have Hamza after Asim. We mentioned before Asim, we have Hamza. He was also from Kufa, same as Imam Asim. And his two rawis were Khalaf and Khalad. Then we have Kisa'i, also from Kufa, and his two students were Abu al-Hadith and Duri. So when we study these 7 qira'at, we study it via a text called the Shatibiyya. And that's actually a poem written by Imam al-Shatibi. In this poem, he explains the rules of the 7 qira'at. Explains the rules of these 7 qira'at, and only one tariq is included for each qira'at. So like we had the chain of narration going from the Qari to the Rawi, it continues to go down. And those that come below the Rawis, those are known as Turq. So there's only one tariq included for each qira'ah. So over here you can see that the heading is the 10 qira'at, but here we've only mentioned 7. We've only mentioned 7 qira'at. Only 7 have been mentioned, but if there are 10, then what about the rest? So the remaining are the following 3 qurra, and again each one has 2 rawis. So we have Abu Ja'far, he was also from Medina, also al-Madani. His 2 students, Ibn Warudan, should be Ibn Warudan over here, and Ibn Jammaz. Ibn Warudan and Ibn Jammaz. Then you have Yaqub, and his 2 students are Ruwais and Rawh. And lastly we have Khalaf al-Ashir, and his 2 students were Ishaq and Idris. Here we learn it from a poem written by Imam Ibn al-Jazari, and the poem is the Durra. Many of you should be aware with Imam Ibn al-Jazari. Many of you indicated you've already studied the Jazariya. So it's a poem that's named after him on Tajweed. And this is, however, a poem on the qira'at. So it explains the 3 qira'at in this poem. And again, only one tariq is included for each of the qira'at. Then in the 10 qira'at by these 2 texts, the Shatibiyya and the Durra, it is known as the Ashara Sughra. Known as the Ashara Sughra, the minor 10 qira'at. Why the minor 10 qira'at? Because there was only one tariq for each riwayah. Then Imam Ibn al-Jazari, the same one who wrote the Durra, he wrote another poem known as the Tayyibah. So in this poem, he explains the rules of recitation for all the 10 qira'at, the 7 as well as the 3, all 10 qira'at. But furthermore, he includes multiple different turuq for each qira'ah. Multiple different turuq are included for each qira'ah. There are thus more awjuh, more ways of recitation that are allowed and found in the Tayyibah, and therefore learning it by the Tayyibah is known as the Ashara Kubra, the major 10 qira'at. Why? Because there are more ways of recitation that are to be found. So that's basically an overview of the first part of the lesson. Go back to the text. You can read through the introduction yourselves. This over here is the contents page. So as I said, we're going to cover 2 topics per lesson. So for today, we're starting with the overview of the 10 qira'at, which we've covered. And then we're going to move on to Nun Sakina and Tanween. And I've given the course overview in the group chat as well. So this is basically what I did in the presentation. Again, you can read through this on your own if you haven't done so already. So you have the Shatibiyya and the 7 qurra, the Durra and the 3 qurra. In the Shatibiyya, all the qurra together with the ruwat, and then the Durra with the qurra and the ruwat. So I've composed a poem to make it easy for you as students to learn these names. As I mentioned, it can be overwhelming to have to learn and memorize all of these names. And we find that in Islam, our scholars have written poems on basically all the sciences. You've learned the Tuhfa, most likely, maybe even the Jazariya, maybe some other texts as well. And having it in a poem where there's a rhyme, there's a meter to it, makes it easy to memorize and to learn. So similarly, this poem, it has a rhyme, it also has a meter. And the idea is not to sit and learn it and memorize it by repeating, but rather just to listen to it. And that's why I've asked some people to do some audios, which are available on YouTube. And I've shared this in the group as well, that just hopefully by listening to the audio of this poem, you can hopefully become familiar with the names of these Qur'an and Ruwat. So if you haven't started, then you need to try and do so, inshallah. I had actually a presentation regarding this poem about a month or two back. Some of you might have been present in that particular presentation. And I mentioned there that besides writing it for the students that are going to study this book and study the qira'at, I also wrote it for my sons, so that hopefully one day they will also grow up and be familiar with the qira'at. And at that point in time, Yusuf, alhamdulillah, my son, already knew a few of the lines. Alhamdulillah, he's learned a bit more. So we're going to go through the poem very quickly, but I'm going to ask Yusuf to come and recite it for us, inshallah. And just give me a second. Bismillah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Oh, praise be to Allah, the one, the supreme. Peace be on Muhammad. Now take from me these few words of meter. The names of noblemen, one in you will find. They be of the books, the Quran, the divine which transcends guidance to all humankind. Yes, he does often not mediators from they must be in these blood. But Medina and after the sainted one with Qalun from him, they was the fair one. We stand as man on they was given it, but they name from this teacher other one said Ibn Kathir, the Meccan follower, has acclaimed to him Abdullah, his narrators changed. The first one that you see is Ahmad Bazzi, then Muhammad Namunas Kumbul, you agree a woman from Boston, even he put in on each other, Yazid Yahya turned to the I know as well as Salih, Susi, for Abdullah, blessed charity support. The first one.
The first link to him.
The first link to him is the one called Hisham, and then Abdullah, who is chased to that one in the great city of Kufa. They were gifting, they nodded like a food giving cheese. The followers, as he was known, learned Shukran Hafs like a son of his own. As for Hamza as Zayyat, how pure were they, patiently reading the book that you see. He precisely taught his name was Sulaim, and Khalad after him came. The next is Ali, who was called Isari. For him in Ihram, in Ishur, you will see. He taught Abul Hayth, who was late, was named, and also Dewey, who before the first place. Another from Medina was he named Yazid. Abu Ja'far was a follower indeed. Taught Isa, who was named as Ibn Waddan, and he taught Ibn Jammas, who was Sulaiman. Another from Basya was Yaqub Hamrami. Another Muhammad called Jubayr, Yohan from he. Another from Great Kufa, Khalaf comes again, and now as a leader who has his own chain. He's the 10th.
And this is called?
Al-Ashir, in Idris, learned from the Sky Mahi.
Well done. So he's up until the 23 lines of the 30-line poem. So just a few more to go, inshallah. I'll just read the remainder of the poem quickly. So these are the names presented before you of readers like full moons. What a lovely view. The narrators are like stars, shining brightly, dispelling all darkness so that we can see. They spent all their lives in teaching the Quran, seeking no recompense from any of insan. May Allah be pleased with them eternally. May we follow their way with sincerity. May we all be told to recite and ascend, and may we then read and read without any end, till we are joined with beloved Mustafa in the highest ranks of Firdaus al-A'la. May we hear the book read by him, peace on him, and by the Lord himself, all praise be to him. So alhamdulillah, another reason I asked Yusuf to come do the recitation is just to show you that if he can do it, then the rest of you, alhamdulillah, should be able to do it as well. He just turned 4. He was 3 when he started to learn the poem. Alhamdulillah, he turned 4. And I met a student that was doing this course, registered for this course just early in the day. And I asked him about the names and whether he's learned them or not. And he said how difficult it was, how confusing he found it. But hopefully there should be motivation, encouragement for him and the rest of you that if Yusuf can do it, then the rest of you can, inshallah. So as I said, it is going to be a bit tough if these are the first time actually encountering all of these names. But I did share it in the group earlier, and I asked everybody if they can try and familiarize themselves with these names. So with every topic, there's an exercise that goes with it as well. So I actually want to try and complete that as well as we go through. So I would like the sessions to be a bit interactive and not just me explaining all the time. So how we're going to do it is that we're going to make use of the chat and the raise hand feature. So if you are familiar with some of the names, and then you want to give a response, you just raise your hand. And out of those that have raised their hands, I will just choose one person to give the answer. You can either come on the mic or you can just type your answer in the chat. And then if it's correct, I will indicate, or if not, I will do the correction and we can go through it together, inshallah. So, mashallah, see the hand is up for you. First one, Ibrahim Hassan. The first one, Nafiya. You can see his narrators, his rawis, they are left blank. Can anybody give me the names? Who are the narrators for Nafiya, the first of the 10 Qurra? Zaid, yes, you can go ahead. Qalun and Warsh. You can see some responses, inshallah. So those of you that have the book, you can actually do it as we go along as well. Some people have purchased the book as well. So you can fill it in as we go along. If like me, you have a touchscreen device and you have the PDF, then also you can fill it in as we go along. If not, then you can just try and do it mentally as we go along, inshallah. The next one, I've put in the narrators. The narrators are Bazzi and Kumbul. So on top, obviously, we'll fill in the Qari. Anybody mention who the narrators, who the Qari is for this particular case? MashaAllah Karam is Ibn Kathir. Ibn Kathir. As I said, there are a lot of people that have registered for the course. It's currently 50 people in the meeting. So if you've given a response, maybe try and give somebody else a chance for the next one, inshallah. Abu Amr is the Qari. So who are these 2 rawis? Ibrahim is correct. It is Duri Susi. Next one, again, the names here are the narrators, Hisham and Ibn Dakwan. So on top of them, we'll fill in the Qari. Will the Qari be? Is Ibn Amir. Amir. Go further down. Okay, this one should be easy. You've got Shu'ba and Hafs. This will be Asim. My handwriting. We next have Hamza. We have Hamza and his 2 students will be Khalaf and Khalaf. Not the students, but his rawis. Khalaf. Ibrahim is answering everything. Okay, Yusha, mashallah, has given the next one. The next one is Kisai. But it's a giveaway here because I've written at the bottom Duri Kisai. So obviously over here, this is Kisai. So why did I mention over here Duri Kisai? You might see over here on top the name Duri as well. So it's the same person. You have Duri, who is the student of Abu Amr. Duri is the student of Abu Amr, and Duri is also the student of Kisai. So you just mention Duri without any specification, then that means Duri Abu Amr, the student of Abu Amr, or the Rawi rather of Abu Amr, and then Duri Kisai would be as a student of Kisai. So those are the 7 Qur'an. Right, moving on now to the 3 Qira'at. The 3 Qira'at. We have Ibn Wardan, Ibn Jammaz. So who is the teacher? The teacher is Abu Ja'far. DJ, as my wife would say. Ja'far. Then you have Yaqub, and his 2 students are Ruwais and Rawh. Lastly, we have Idris and Ishaq, and the teacher would be Khalaf. Again, you'd have seen at Duri, the name came twice, and here Khalaf comes twice. Okay. However, for Khalaf, he first comes as the student of Hamza, or rather than the Rawi, the narrator of Hamza, whereas here is a reader in his own right. And that was mentioned in the poem. Khalaf comes again, but now as a reader who has his own chain. He's now a Qari over here at the bottom, whereas before he was a Rawi. So mashallah, alhamdulillah, the students have done well in terms of being familiar with the names. However, there's only a few that actually participated out of the 50. So the rest of you, if you have not yet familiarized yourself with these names, please try and do so. Because if you're going to learn the applications of the Qira'at, then obviously you need to know the names and who the Qur'an and the Ruwat are. So I've given links here to the commentary of the poem, which hopefully you can try and read and watch as well. There was a presentation on that, as I mentioned. If you want to go further in terms of learning more about the Quran, the Ruwat, there is a book by Qari Salim Gaibi, which you can read as well. Alhamdulillah, I think we're doing well for time. We did in less than half an hour, the first part of the lesson. But before we go on, are there any questions at this particular point in time with regard to that first half of the lesson? Right, so we looked at the 10 Qurra, the names of all of them, and the 20 Ruwat, the names of all the 20 Ruwat. Are there any questions on this before we move on? Okay, moving on. Yes. So in the presentation I did initially, it gives you an impression that, okay, you've got the teacher on top and the students below. But I was trying to be a bit more specific in using the word student different and Rawi differently. So in that presentation itself, it doesn't differentiate. But some of them learn directly from the teacher. For example, Shu'ba and Hafs, they learn directly from Asim. Nafi', his students, Qalun and Warsh, they learn directly from Nafi'. But when it comes to Ibn Kathir, they didn't learn directly from Bazi and Qumbul, his Rawis, they didn't learn directly from him. They were intermediaries in between. There were 2 or 3 other people in between. So even though they didn't learn directly from the teacher, they are still regarded as the Ruwat, as the narrators. So that's not mentioned in the presentation I did, but in the poem, that is made clear. So the benefit of the poem, besides just teaching you the names that we went through now, it actually gives you the real names. So Qalun and Warsh, the real Zama, Isa and Uthman. And a lot of us that we come into the science of Qira'at, we just know Warsh, we just know Qalun, but not so familiar with the real names. For example, we have Ruwais and myself. I didn't actually know until I wrote that commentary that his name is actually Muhammad. His name is actually Muhammad. Ruwais is his title. So it gives you the real names, besides the names that they are famous for. It also tells you the ascriptions, like Yaqub is Al-Hadrami, Khalaf is known as Al-Bazzar, and so on. It also tells you whom of them are tabi'un. I mentioned in the presentation that you have the tabi'un, then the Qur'an after them. But some of the Qur'an are actually tabi'un in their own right. Abu Ja'far was a tabi'i, Asim was a tabi'i, rahimahumullah. So that is also mentioned in the commentary and in the poem itself as well. So that's some of the points of benefit you can gain in addition from learning the poem. Also, something I just remembered now, at Tanzil, whatever books you do, at the end you get tested and then you get ijazah in that. So you start with Murshid al-Qari, then a book written by Imam Nafiya Gaibi, and then when you finish that, you get tested and you get ijazah in it. Then you go on to the tuhfa, and again you learn it, you memorize it, you recite it, get tested on it, and you get ijazah in it. And that's the practice of the ulama from the old already, to give ijazah in the text, not only for the Quran, but in the other related books as well. And we don't only have to restrict it to those earlier texts, like the Tuhfa, the Jazariya, the Durra, the Shatibiya, even contemporary works. Scholars living in our times that have written books, they issue ijazah for their books, for their works that they have written. So alhamdulillah, I've read to the teacher, Sheikh Salih Al-Ubaid, and he's written a poem, and I've received ijazah in his poem. So similarly, those of you that are interested, even though this is now maybe a bit different, that's the English poem. Yes, Ishaq comes before Idris. Yeah, some mistake of it. It should be Ishaq and then Idris. But over here is in the correct sequence. Ishaq and then Idris. So I did ask Maulana Salim to have a look at this book before it was published, but unfortunately it was a bit busy. So he said I should just go ahead with the publish, and then as I do this class, then I can actually make any corrections. I'll just make a note over here. I need to switch that around there. Should be Ishaq and then Idris. Shukran for that, Ibrahim. So as I was mentioning, yes, I've written this poem, and even though it's in English, if you want to, you can get ijazah in it, inshallah. You just need to memorize the poem, and then maybe you can just send me a voice note of yourself reading the poem, and then you can get ijazah for that poem, inshallah. Okay, moving on to the next part. So the chapter 2 is the single applications, and in chapter 3 is the combined applications. So you don't actually get these terms in qira'at. There are terms that I have coined and made up. So in thinking about how I'm going to teach this course, how to get people that have not learned all the rules of the usul of the Shatibiya and so on to understand this, I've looked at basically the applications that you find within the qira'at. What does warsh apply, what does qalun apply, and so on. And I've divided them into those where there's only one qari that applies a particular way of reading. And all of those you will find in chapter 2. All of those applications where there's only one qari that reads in a particular way, you will find this in chapter 2. Why? So that when you learn this rule, and now you're hearing somebody recite, if you hear the application, then there's only one possibility. It has to be that particular qari or that particular rawi. Whereas in chapter 3, it will now be combined applications. There's a particular way of reading, and it's not only restricted to one person. Could be 2, could be 3, could be more. So in that case, you want to know exactly who it is. But when you hear the application, you can at least figure out, okay, it's one of these 2. And then you listen for something else that would differentiate between them. So this will be the easier rules to learn and to ways to identify the Quran, the Ruwat, inshallah. And I've tried to do it in the sequence where it's something that you're familiar with in the riwayah of Hafs, and then go on to those that are maybe a bit different from what you'd find within Hafs. So I did mention that there are no requirements to the course, but it would be very helpful if you actually have a solid foundation in the tajweed rules of Hafs. And then from there, actually learn how other qira'at different. But for the benefit of those that maybe are a bit rusty in the rules for Hafs, before we go on, we're just going to do some revision, inshallah. So we're looking at the rules of Nun Sakina and Tanween. Nun Sakina and Tanween. So I have these summaries over here that I've compiled, and we're going to focus here specifically on the Nun Sakina. So there are 4 rules of Nun Sakina. Before I go further, can anybody mention what those rules are? Okay, so we've got Ilhar, Ikhfa, Idgham, and then Iqlab. Okay, shukran. So to go further, we'll do it in this way. In the rules of Nun Sakina and Tanween, you first have to see in a particular word a Nun Sakina or a Tanween. Then in order to know what rule to apply, you look at what comes after it in the Mus'haf. So if the letter that follows is one of the letters of the throat, right, of the halq, Hamzaha, Ain Ha, Ghain Kha, then you apply Ilhar. Ilhar would be to read each one clearly from its own makhraj. So Kufuwan Ahad, Anhar, An'amta, and so on. Min ghillin, you have a noon sakina, you have a tanween, followed by one of these letters of the throat. You read it clearly from its makhraj. And then looking after that, if it's not one of the letters of the throat, you check if it is one of the letters of yarmalun. You check if it is letters of yarmalun, the ya, the ra, the mim, the lam, the waw, or the noon. And if it is, now you do another check, and you check if it's letters of yanmu. If it is one of the letters of yanmu, then you would apply idgham bi ghunna. Idgham bi ghunna, assimilation with ghunna. So what happens over here is that you leave out the nun sakin and tanween, and you go straight into the letter that follows. However, the sifa of ghunna will remain. So man ya'mal, for example, would be read as man ya'mal. You read out the nun. You go straight into the ya, but with ghunna. Man ya'mal. Min ni'ma, min ni'ma, min ma. Go straight into the mim with ghunna. Mimma, min wal. You leave out the noon, go straight into the waw. The two letters become one that is mushaddad. That is idgham. Two letters become one that is mushaddad, but this would be idgham naqis, a deficient or incomplete idgham, because a sifa remains. The ghunna remains. Min wal. If, however, it is the letters lam or ra, then you do it idgham bi ghunna. Idgham with ghunna. Milladun, milladun, or mir rabbihim. Okay, so that's the rules of idgham. Then if it's not one of the letters of yarmalun, you check if it's a ba, then it will be iqlab. Iqlab or qalb would need to change. So what do you change? You change the nun sakina into a mim sakina. And then you apply it with the ghunna as well. So an, biya, the an, the nun changes to a mim. Then you make the ikhfa, the ghunna. Anbiya, anbiya. And if it's one of the remaining letters, then it will be ikhfa. Ikhfa is in between ilhar and idgham. In between ilhar and idgham. So you go towards the makhraj of the letter that follows, you then make ghunna, and then you recite the letter. Anta, anta, anqa, anqada. And because you're merging the sound with the letter that follows, the ikhfa of every letter will sound differently. Anta is different from anqa. Another difference is that you're preparing for the letter that comes afterwards. So if it's a flat letter, the ikhfa will be flat. If it's a full letter, the ikhfa will be full. In anta, the ikhfa is flat. In anqa, the ikhfa is full. So that's just a revision of the rules of hafs, right? So out of these different applications, ilhar, idgham, iqlab, ikhfa, in the 7 qira'at, there's only differences in idgham. Remember that in the book, we're discussing initially, the 7 applications. So we're only looking at the 7 qira'at. We're not looking at the 3 qira'at. Okay, we deal with them separately. So when I say there's only differences in this particular chapter, I'm beginning the 7 qira'at. Because some of you might be familiar with the 3 qira'at, you'll know there's something additional there as well. But here we're looking only initially at the 7 qira'at. So the only difference would come in over here by idgham. Okay, so what will happen over here is that instead of dividing into yanmu and lam ra, it will be done in this way. With the ya and the wa. They won't be part of that category of idgham bi ghunna. Instead, they will be part of the category of idgham bi ghayri ghunna. Idgham bi ghayri ghunna. This is applied only by khalaf and hamza. Remember, khalaf comes twice, but here we're speaking about the 7 qira'at. So when I say khalaf, it means khalaf and hamza. Khalaf, the student, or the rawi rather, of hamza. So he will have ghunna only in the noon and the mim. Min ni'ma, mimma. Whereas in idgham bi ghayri ghunna, like milladun, mir rabbihim, you do the same with the ya. So instead of man ya'mal, it would be may ya'mal. Instead of miwal, it would be miwal. And basically that is the second part of the lesson for today. We have the rules of noon, sakin, and tanween. Hopefully you're familiar with that. The only additional rule you need to learn now is that for khalaf and hamza, he has idgham bi ghayri ghunna in the ya and the wa. Idgham without any ghunna in the ya and in the wa. Just something came to mind. I was speaking to somebody about this course, and he mentioned a misconception that he had with regard to qira'at, and myself as well. Many years ago, I had this misconception that you see the likes of Abdul Basit bin Shawi reciting in a very slow, melodious, the Mujawwid style, and you think that that is what Qira'at is. Whereas Qira'at is simply learning to recite the Quran, but with different applications. Like you have the rules of Tajweed, it's just a different set of Tajweed rules, and that is Qira'at. So you don't have to have a melodious voice and a good tune and so on, strong voice, in order to learn Qira'at. Right? Some of you might have that misconception. It's a misconception I had that held me back from learning Qira'at for a long time. But simply learning different applications or different rules of recitation for different Quran. So if you go back to the book, okay, what I discussed now is basically what you'll find over here. You have the 4 rules of Nun Sakin and Tanween. They only have differences with regard to Idgham. The 2 types are with Ghunna and without Ghunna. Hafs as well as the majority, they have Idgham with Ghunna and Yanmu, and without Gham and the Lam and the Ra. Khalaf an Hamza, on the other hand, he has Idgham bi Ghayri Ghunna in the Ya and the Waw as well. So only has Ghunna in the Nun and the Mim, and without Ghunna, the Lam, the Ra, the Ya, and the Waw. So again, we have an exercise over here, and we'll do it in a similar way, inshallah. So you have to highlight those places in which Khalaf will read without Ghunna in the Waw and the Ya. Again, those of you that have the hard copies of the books, you can actually do it as we go along. If you have a touch screen, you can do it on the touch screen. And if not, you can just try and do it mentally, inshallah. So if I just show you the first one, use the highlighter. Where will the difference come in? It would be over here. First, I have to find where is the tanween, or where is the nun sakin and the nun sakina, right? And then check for what letter that comes after that. So over here we have the khishawatun, the tanween over there, the dhammatan. After that is a wow. Normally for hafs that would be idgham bi ghunna, idgham bi ghunna. But here for Khalaf and Hamza it would be idgham bi ghayri ghunna. So I'm going to give you 2 or 3 minutes to try and do it for yourselves. You can see some people doing it on the screen in the meeting. If you can please refrain from that. Just want everybody to have a chance to go through it for themselves, and then we'll go through it collectively, inshallah. And the format of how we'll do that is like before. If you have the response, you raise your hand, and out of those people that raise their hand, I will ask that particular person to give their response. It would be ideal and quicker if you just come on the mic and verbally give the answer. But yeah, I think some people will be a bit shy to do that. The meeting is being recorded, right, and is currently also being streamed on YouTube. So just bear that in mind if you do want to come on the mic, so you at least know that. Just going back in the chat, and I saw some questions that I missed earlier. It says, will these slides be made available? The slides have been made available already in the group chat. Is the ikhfa lighter or flat when coming before qaf with a kasra? Yes, the levels of fullness will apply. Okay, so let's begin. I see somebody has given the first response already. So over here by man yaqulu, it would be may yaqulu. Okay. And the next one, for to win, 104, be over here. If you'd like to participate, please raise your hand, and then I can select from those that raise their hand. We will give the response, inshallah. Currently, I only see Abdullah's hand, but Ibrahim has raised his hand. So in the next one, number 4, Ibrahim, where would the change be found? And Yadriba, the Ya over there. Muniba, number 5, where would the change be found?
Between man and yufsidu.
Correct. Inshallah. Anybody else? Number 6. Ibrahim.
فارض ولا بكر. وفارض ولا.
فارض ولا. Correct. Anybody else? Ihsan, I know you're there. I saw you early in the meeting. Number 7, Ihsan. Where were the change we found? Okay, see Amra's hand is up. Amra, number 7, for the change we found.
فلن يخلف.
Correct. Mahmouda, number 8.
سيئة
Correct.
التوبة.
Inshallah. Number 9. Anybody? Number 9. Salih.
من
يفعل. Okay, so the idea behind this is that this is something new, perhaps for you. So I'm now going to recite these particular verses, but now you have something visual to help you. You have a visual cue to know that that is where you're going to look out for the change. We're making idgham بغير غنة. We're making idgham بغير غنة. So there's no nasal. Ghunna is the nasalization sound. So the normal reading would be غشاوة ولهم. So you're making idgham. You're going straight into the waw. Right? You're leaving out the pronunciation of the noon, but the sifa of the ghunna remains. That's the normal recitation. من يقول. But now to be done, we go straight into the next letter without any ghunna. غشاوة ولهم من يقول. So there's no nasalization. That's what it means بغير غنة. Again, you can explain it in terms of idgham naqis and kamil. غشاوة ولهم من يقول, whether غنة is idgham naqis, whereas بغير غنة would be idgham tam or idgham kamil, idgham tam. Okay, so I'm going to recite the verses, and you just need to try and become familiar with hearing the application. And then in future, if you hear anybody reading and you hear this application, then you know that it is which riwayah. Which riwayah will it be? You can respond in the chat. Amara? If you hear this application, then you know it is which riwayah. Yes.
بسأل خلف الحفص.
Khalaf and Hamza.
الحمزة.
Khalaf and Hamza. And remember, Khalaf is a reader, is a qari in his own right, but this is specifically when he comes as the rawi of Hamza, Khalaf and Hamza. Again, there's a bit more technicalities if you're looking at the Kubra, but we'll get into that later at the end, inshallah. Okay, so I'm going to read the verses now. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. غشاوة ولهم من يقول بل لجوا في عتو ونفور أن يضرب مثلا أتجعل فيها من يفسد فيها يقول إنها بقرة لا فارض ولا بكر فلن يخلف الله عهده من كسب سيئة وأحاطت به من يفعل ذلك منكم. That was the first part of the exercise. First one, just to highlight it. Part B was to listen to the recitation of the verb verses, which I have now done. Now we're going to go further. We're going to do something similar, but without the visual cue to help you. I'm now going to recite for you these particular surahs in the riwayah of Khalaf and Hamza, and you must try and hear that particular application. So when I set up these exercises, okay, how it actually came about is that I have a different book that I'm currently working on. We have a student that's doing the usul of the Sab'a Qira'at with me, and it's the first student I have, alhamdulillah, that's doing this. So I'm typing up notes for him as we go along. And like you have over here, with every section of notes, I'm included an exercise. So in that particular exercises, I was very careful to try and select only that particular application. So if you look at this exercise over here, there are a lot of different applications that khalaf has. But here you only found that one application. You only found the ghunna, the idgham without the ghunna. That was the only application you found. You didn't find the imala or the sakt or anything else. Okay. However, over here, I'm going to now recite with all of those other applications as well. So you're going to hear a lot of things that are different to the riwayah of Hafs and Asim, but you must try and focus only on this one that we're learning today, which is idgham bi ghayri ghunna in the ya and the wa. Try and listen and focus and find out only where that one is. Okay. So I'm going to read the surah, and then like before, I'm going to ask you, and you can respond and tell me where was the change found. Right? So the first one, Surah Lahab, I've specifically chosen for all of these exercises from Juz Amma, starting at the back and working up and choosing those surahs so it's short. It will be easy to identify, and it's surahs that we are all familiar with. بإذن ta'ala. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. تبت يدا أبي لهب وتب ما أغني عنه ماله وما كسب سيصلي نارا ذات لهب وامرأته حمالة الحطب في جيدها حبل من مسد. Okay, so anybody can raise your hand if you'd like to respond. Aniba, where was the change found?
Okay, sorry, my ears are now highlighting the last one. Lahabiu watab.
Lahabiu. Okay. Correct. That was one application where the change was found. There was another one. Anybody else? Here was the other one. Ibrahim.
Was there not 2 times Lahabin came?
Yeah, but it's in the different verse, right? سيصلي نارا ذات لهب وامرأته. I specifically read through there at the end of the verse to bring out that particular application. Okay, so those are the only 2 in that particular surah. The next one, Surah Zilzal, Surah Zalzala. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إذا زلزلت الأرض زلزالها وأخرجت الأرض أثقالها وقال الإنسان ما لها يومئذ تحدث أخبارها بأن ربك أوحي لها يومئذ يصدر الناس أشتاتا ليروا أعمالهم فمن يعمل مثقال ذرة خيرا يره ومن يعمل مثقال ذرة شرا يره. Okay, so yeah, they were a bit more. Mahmouda, which application? We did define application.
Okay. يومئذ يصدر الناس يومئذ, that one, and then فمن يعمل, and then again ومن يعمل, and then yeah.
Okay, mashallah, correct. Was there anything else, or was that everything?
Okay, yeah, that is concerning the idgham.
Yes, we're just focusing now on the idgham. Khayrayyara, that was another one. Sharwayyara was another one. Okay. Next one, Surah Al-A'la. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سبح اسم ربك الأعلى الذي خلق فسوي والذي قدر فهدي والذي أخرج المرعى فجعله غثاء نحوي سنقرئك فلا تنسي إلا ما شاء الله إنه يعلم الجهر وما يخفي ونيسرك لليسر فذكر إن نفعت الذكر سيذكر من يخشي ويتجنبها الأشقي الذي يصلى النار الكبرى ثم لا يموت فيها ولا يحيي قد أفلح من تزكي وذكر اسم ربه فصلي بل تؤثرون الحياة الدنيا والآخرة خير وأبقي إن هذا لفي الصحف الأولى صحف إبراهيم وموسى. Okay. Muniba, where was the application from?
The first one I heard was فذكر إن نفعت الذكر ذكرى, sorry, that's how I would say it. And then in the second,
over there there wasn't application.
oh,
فذكر إن نفعت الذكر. There was sakta over there, there was imala, which is differences that are different from hafs, but it wasn't the one we're looking for.
Cool. Then what about خير وأبقى?
Correct. خير وأبقي, that is إدغام الخير هن. Anybody else? Where else in the surah was it found? Zaid?
سيذكر من يخشى.
من يخشى.
Correct. سيذكر من يخشى. I think those are the only two in that particular surah. Okay, so the idea was that I actually wanted to do like I did for you the recitation of the verses now. My idea was actually to do recordings of that and include links to that here in the book as well. So that if people were interested, but they couldn't manage to attend these live courses, live sessions, then they could at least go through it on their own. I didn't have time to complete all of that, but hopefully maybe at the end of the year, if I have some time, I'll do that. So then people can actually work through this book independently. But the second part of it, you can actually do on your own, right? I've narrated for you these surah now, but you can actually do this kind of exercise on your own. We have included a link over here. If you have the hard copy, you can just scan the QR code. It'll take you to a particular website. Alhamdulillah, it's a very beautiful, nice website. You can listen to any riwayah. You can listen to any riwayah out of the 10 qira'at, and then try and become familiar with hearing this particular application. Right? So we'll just show you how it works. So you have over here, by default, set to Hafs and Asim, the normal way of recitation. But if you click on the drop down, you have all the different options over here. So today we did Khalaf and Hamza. So we're going to look for that one. Khalaf and Hamza. Then you can select the particular surah. So we did Surah Lahab. So let's just go to that. So we did Surah Zilzal. So let's go to that one. Then you can select your reciter. Some of them have more than one option. Others, depending on the riwayah, will have maybe only one option. You can choose how many times to repeat the ayah, how many times to repeat the particular section. The nice thing about it as well is that it actually shows you using a color coding where the differences are to be found. But I would like you to do this, if you're going to be doing it on your own, to do it by just listening, right? So without looking, just press play, listen to it, and try and identify like you did now. And then once you've done listening to it, you can actually visually look at it and see where the applications were. Right? So we did this surah over here, and you can see over here, يَوْمَ إِذِي, that's the إِدْغَامُ بِخَيْرِهُنَّ, which here they've used the blue color coding. فَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ, again in blue, خَيْرًا يَرَهُ in blue, وَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ شَرًّا يَرَهُ. So those are the applications that we're looking for. You can see the other colors over there. Those are other changes that you will apply, which some of them we'll get to later. Not necessarily all of them, but some of them we'll cover later, inshallah. But for now, if you just hear that one particular application, then already you know it is going to be Khalaf and Hamza, right? So you can try and do some more practice. You don't necessarily have to just listen to these surahs. You can just take a random surah, listen to it, and try and become familiar with listening to this particular application, inshallah. And we did quite good for time. Actually finished 7 minutes before the time, but there's still opportunity now for questions. If there were any questions you had during the lesson that you'd like to ask now. Ibrahim.
So am I right in thinking that Khalaf is the only one who does this?
As I said initially, we're looking only at the 7 qira'at. So if you restrict yourself to only the 7 qira'at, then yes, it's only Khalaf and Hamza that does this. If you expand to include the other 3 qira'at, the 10 qira'at, then still it would only be Khalaf and Hamza is the only one that does this. If however you expand to include the Ashra Kubra, we're looking at all 10 qira'at with all the multiple turuq as selected by Ibn al-Jazari in al-Tayyibah, then you'd find a very interesting application, which is you have idgham bi ghayri ghunna in the ya and idgham with ghunna in the wa. And that is applied by Duri Kisa'i via al-Darir. Okay, so in that particular sense, you'll have also idgham bi ghayri ghunna in the ya for somebody other than Khalaf and Hamza. But you're very unlikely to hear that, right? It's highly unlikely that you'll hear the recitation. I've only heard it once in my life, like in a normal setting outside of a dars with a teacher. I've only heard it once. Qari Salim Gaibi, he did like that once in the Tarawih. So yeah, you're almost guaranteed that if you hear that application, it will be Khalaf and Hamza. But there is that other application. Any other questions? So yes, as I mentioned, that's the reasoning by doing it in this particular manner. That we're looking at the single applications, where it's going to be only applied by one Rawi or Qari. So the entire chapter 2 of the book, whatever rules we're going to learn, it will be only applied by one Qari within the 7 qira'at.
Asifa min fadlik ya Ustad.
Just let me see, there's a question here. So when it comes to the levels of fullness of the harakat, right, there are different views. But the one that is explained by my teachers, Sheikh Abdullah bin Salih al-Ubaid, is that there will be 3 levels of fullness of the letters. So for example, the qaf, it's a full letter, it's a letter of isti'ala. So you check whether there's a fatha, a dhamma, and a kasra. Qa, qu, and qi. So in all cases, it will be full, but the qaf with the fatha will be more full, slightly less full with the dhamma, slightly less full with a kasra. That would be the lowest level, qi. Similarly with sakin, you check what comes before. And if it's a fatha, then on the first level, dhamma, the second level, kasra on the lower level. And similarly, it would apply, speaking under correction, but I think it would apply as well with the ikhfa. So if it's with a fatha, then it will be on the highest level, dhamma on the slightly lower level, the kasra on the least fullness. Another question here, the 2 rawis for qurra sound the same, follow the same rules, example, qalun and warsh. And the answer to that is no, right? Especially in that particular example, you've given the qalun and warsh, even though they learned both directly from the same teacher, Nafiya, the recitations are very different. The one I played at the beginning, right, was warsh, and it's very different from qalun. It's very, very different from qalun. However, that's more of an exception. In most cases, the two ruwat are mostly similar. For example, Ibn Kathir, Bazin Qumbu, the recitations are very, very similar. Ibn Amir, his 2 students, Hisham, Ibn Dhakwan, his 2 rawis, they are fairly similar. Why does it differ? Because the teacher would have taught differently, possibly, to the 2 students. So he'd have taught qalun differently from what he taught warsh. He learned from many, many teachers. Nafi' mentions that he learned from 70 of the tabi'un. And he selected that which they agreed upon. So he learned from multiple teachers, learning different applications, and then he made a selection in his particular qira'ah, but then he taught differently to his students. If that answers the question. Ibrahim is asking, you read the Kubra, not the Shatibiyya. I'm not sure what you mean. When I was reading the exercises now, I was reading via the Sukhra, by the Shatibiyya, not via the Kubra. If that is what you're asking about, the recitation in the lesson. Okay, I'm not sure if I did or not, but if I did, then that will be a mistake. That is by the Kubra. In which word did I make the sakt? I have to go listen to the recording and see if I made that mistake. Is this for beginners? The idea is to try and make it hopefully as simple and easy as possible, so that everybody can benefit from it. But at least, as I said, I need to have a grounding in the rules for Hafs. Otherwise, it can be perhaps a bit overwhelming in terms of having to learn all of these new rules. But hopefully everybody can benefit from this, inshallah. We have 1 minute left, so we're to end now. Hopefully, inshallah, it will get easier as we go on, inshallah. Just one thing before we end. There's a few people that registered very late, so they got the info regarding the course a bit late. But if you haven't yet ordered and you'd like to order the book, I would request if you please can do so as soon as possible, because there are some people that have ordered, but I haven't placed orders with the printer yet, because I wanted to just see maybe after today if maybe some more orders will come through. So if you haven't yet placed an order for the book and you'd like to do so, then please try and do so, inshallah. Is there any particular reason why Hafs is so well known versus others? That's a bit of a long question, so I think maybe we'll keep that for the next session, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. سلام.